था.
You don't need more grammar. You don't need more grammar.
Yeah,
You need these
5 habits.
Have you ever wondered why some people seem to speak English so naturally, even though they don't spend hours studying grammar every single day, while others have been learning English for years, but still hesitate every time they open their mouths to speak? If that sounds familiar, then today's episode might completely change the way you think about learning English, because the secret to becoming fluent isn't having a perfect memory, learning thousands of vocabulary words overnight, or speaking with a perfect accent. The real secret is developing a few simple daily habits that slowly train your brain to think, understand, and speak English with confidence.
Exactly, Emma. One of the biggest mistakes English learners make is believing that fluency will suddenly appear one day after they finish another grammar book or memorize another long vocabulary list. But real fluency doesn't happen in one magical moment. It grows little by little through the small actions you repeat every single day. Just like athletes become stronger by practicing consistently and musicians improve by playing their instruments every day, English learners become fluent by building simple habits that eventually become part of their daily lives.
So, if you've ever felt frustrated because you understand English but struggle to speak it, or if you've been asking yourself why your progress feels slower than you expected, don't worry, because you're definitely not alone. In today's episode, we're going to share 5 powerful daily habits that successful English speakers use to improve naturally. These habits are practical, easy to start, and suitable for beginners as well as intermediate learners. And if you stay with us until the end, you'll know exactly what to do every single day to move one step closer to speaking English fluently with confidence. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Modern English Talk, the podcast where we help you improve your English in a simple, practical, and enjoyable way. I'm your host, Emma, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Alex. We're truly excited that you've decided to spend a few minutes with us today because this episode could completely change the way you approach learning English. Whether you're listening while traveling, studying, exercising, or simply relaxing at home, thank you for making us a part of your English learning journey. Our goal is not just to teach you English, but to help you build the confidence to use it naturally in real-life conversations.
Thanks, Emma, and hello to all our amazing listeners around the world. Today's topic is one that almost every English learner needs to hear because so many people believe that becoming fluent requires special talent, years of difficult study, or spending countless hours memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary. The truth is much simpler than that. Fluency is not something you're born with, and it's certainly not something that only a few lucky people can achieve. It's a skill that develops through consistent daily practice and smart learning habits. In other words, what you do every single day matters much more than what you do once in a while. Thanks, Emma, and hello to all our amazing listeners around the world. Today's topic is one that almost every English learner needs to hear because so many people believe that becoming fluent requires special talent, years of difficult study, or spending countless hours memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary. The truth is much simpler than that. Fluency is not something you're born with, and it's certainly not something that only a few lucky people can achieve. It's a skill that develops through consistent daily practice and smart learning habits. In other words, what you do every single day matters much more than what you do once in a while.
That's absolutely right, Alex. Throughout today's conversation, we're going to explore 5 simple daily habits that can make a huge difference in the way you speak English. These habits don't require expensive courses or complicated study plans. Instead, they fit naturally into your everyday routine and help you improve step by step. If you start practicing even one of these habits today and stay consistent, you'll begin to notice positive changes in your confidence, pronunciation, vocabulary, listening skills, and overall fluency. So, let's get started with the very first habit that every successful English learner should develop. Let's begin with what I believe is the most powerful habit of all, and that's thinking in English every single day. At first, this idea might sound difficult, especially if you're used to thinking in your native language and then translating everything into English before you speak. But here's the truth. Translation is one of the biggest reasons people struggle to speak fluently. Every time you translate, your brain has to complete two separate tasks. First, creating the sentence in your native language and then converting it into English. That extra step slows you down, makes you hesitate, and often causes you to lose confidence during conversations. The goal isn't to stop using your native language overnight. Instead, it's to gradually train your brain to create simple thoughts directly in English, one small step at a time.
That's such an important point, Emma. Many learners think they need advanced vocabulary before they can think in English, but that's actually not true. You don't need complicated words to start building this habit. In fact, the simpler your thoughts are, the better. Imagine you're making breakfast. Instead of thinking, I'm going to make breakfast in your own language and then translating it, simply tell yourself in English, I'm making breakfast. I need eggs. The coffee smells good. Today is going to be busy. These are short, natural thoughts that help your brain connect directly with English. The more often you do this, the more automatic it becomes. And after a while, you'll notice that English starts coming to your mind without conscious effort.
Exactly. Another easy way to practice is by describing the world around you in English. If you're walking outside, quietly think, the weather is sunny, that car is moving fast, the park looks beautiful. There are many people here today. If you're at work or in school, you can think, I need to finish this task. I'll talk to my teacher later. I should answer this email after lunch. These simple mental conversations may seem small, but they are incredibly effective because they teach your brain to process English naturally instead of depending on constant translation. And the best part is that you can practice this habit anywhere, at any time, without needing a book, a teacher, or even another person.
I also want to remind everyone that it's completely normal if you don't know every word at the beginning. Don't stop thinking just because you're missing one word. Use a simpler word that you already know, or change the sentence into something easier. Fluency isn't about using perfect vocabulary every time. It's about communicating your ideas clearly and naturally. The more you allow yourself to think with the English you already know, the faster your vocabulary will grow because your brain begins using those words repeatedly in meaningful situations.
That's a great reminder, Alex. So here's today's challenge for everyone listening. For the next 7 days, spend just 5 to 10 minutes thinking only in English. Describe what you're doing, what you're planning, what you can see, or even how you're feeling. Don't worry about making mistakes because no one else can hear your thoughts. This is your private practice time, and it's one of the safest and most effective ways to build fluency. Remember, every fluent English speaker started with simple sentences, and the habit of thinking in English is one of the strongest foundations you can build for confident, natural communication. Now that we've talked about thinking in English, let's move on to the second daily habit, and this one is just as important. Speak English out loud every single day. This may sound obvious, but it's surprising how many learners spend months watching videos, reading books, or completing grammar exercises without actually speaking. They understand a lot of English, but when it's time to have a real conversation, they suddenly freeze. Why does that happen? Because speaking is a skill, and like any other skill, it improves only when you practice it. You can't become a confident swimmer by reading about swimming, and you can't become a fluent English speaker by only studying. At some point, your voice has to become part of your learning process.
I completely agree, Emma. Many people avoid speaking because they're afraid of making mistakes or feeling embarrassed. But here's something I want every listener to remember. Making mistakes is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're learning. Every fluent English speaker has made thousands of mistakes along the way. The difference is that they didn't let those mistakes stop them. Instead, they treated every conversation as another opportunity to improve. So if you're waiting until your English is perfect before you start speaking, you're actually delaying your progress. The best time to start speaking is today, with the English you already know.
Exactly, Alex. And the good news is that you don't need a language partner to build this habit. You can practice completely on your own. Read a short article aloud, describe your room, explain your daily routine, talk about your favorite movie, or even tell yourself what you're planning to do tomorrow. For example, you could say, "Today I'm going to finish my work, then I'll exercise for 30 minutes, and after dinner I'll spend some time reading an English book." These simple speaking exercises help your mouth, tongue, and brain work together, making English feel more natural every day.
Another technique that works incredibly well is recording yourself on your phone. At first, listening to your own voice might feel a little uncomfortable, but don't let that discourage you. Record yourself speaking for just 1 or 2 minutes about any topic. Then listen carefully and ask yourself a few simple questions. Did I speak clearly? Did I pause too much? Were there any words I couldn't pronounce? This kind of self-review helps you notice your strengths and identify areas where you can improve. If you keep your recordings, you'll also be able to compare them after a few weeks and hear just how much progress you've made.
And here's one final tip that can make a huge difference. Don't focus on speaking for a long time. Focus on speaking every single day. Even 10 minutes of daily speaking practice is far more effective than speaking for 1 hour only once a week. Consistency builds confidence, confidence builds fluency, and fluency opens the door to real communication. So, starting today, make a promise to yourself. No matter how busy you are, speak English out loud every day. Your future self will thank you for building this simple but life-changing habit. Now let's move on to our third daily habit, and this is one of my personal favorites because it's something you can do almost anywhere. Listen to real English every single day. One of the biggest reasons learners struggle to speak naturally is that they simply don't hear enough natural English. Many people spend all their time memorizing vocabulary lists or studying grammar rules, but they rarely expose themselves to the way native and fluent speakers actually communicate. Listening isn't just about understanding words. It's about training your ears to recognize pronunciation, sentence rhythm, stress, intonation, and the natural flow of conversation. The more real English you hear, the more familiar it becomes, and eventually your brain starts copying those speaking patterns without you even realizing it.
That's absolutely true, Emma. I also want to point out that there's a huge difference between passive listening and active listening. Passive listening means playing an English podcast or video in the background while you're focused on something else. That can still help a little because your ears become familiar with the sounds of English. But active listening is much more powerful. It means paying attention to how people pronounce words, noticing common expressions, listening for sentence patterns, and asking yourself why a speaker chose certain words. When you listen actively, you're not just hearing English, you're learning how real conversations are built.
Exactly. And the best part is that you don't need hours of free time to build this habit. Even 15 to 20 minutes a day can make a noticeable difference if you're consistent. You can listen while you're walking, driving, cooking, exercising, or even getting ready in the morning. Choose English podcasts, interviews, conversations, audiobooks, or YouTube videos that match your current level. Don't worry if you don't understand every single word. Your goal isn't to catch everything, it's to become comfortable with the sound and rhythm of English. Over time, you'll notice that words you once struggled to understand start feeling familiar and natural.
Here's another technique that has helped thousands of English learners around the world. After listening to a short conversation or a few sentences, pause the audio and try to repeat exactly what you heard. Pay attention to the speaker's pronunciation, speed, and emotion. This practice, often called shadowing, is incredibly effective because it improves your listening and speaking skills at the same time. At first, it might feel challenging to keep up with the speaker, but don't get discouraged. Every attempt helps your brain build stronger connections between listening, understanding, and speaking.
I love that advice, Alex, because it reminds us that listening isn't a passive activity. It's an essential part of becoming fluent. Think about how children learn their first language. Before they ever speak confidently, they spend months and even years listening to the people around them. They hear the same words, phrases, and expressions again and again until those patterns become natural. As English learners, we can follow the same principle. The more quality English you listen to every day, the more natural your own speaking will become. So starting today, make listening to real English a daily habit, because every minute you spend listening is another step towards speaking with confidence and fluency. Now let's move on to the fourth daily habit, and this is a habit that can completely change the way you speak English. Learn phrases, not just individual words. Many learners spend a lot of time memorizing long vocabulary lists, and while vocabulary is important, single words by themselves do not create natural conversations. Native speakers usually think and speak in groups of words, often called phrases or language chunks. When you learn English in phrases, your brain can produce sentences much faster because you don't have to build every sentence word by word. Instead, you already have useful pieces of language ready to use in real situations. That's such an important idea, Emma. Let me give a simple example. Imagine you learn the word decision. That's useful, but if you learn the phrase make a decision, you immediately know how to use that word naturally. Another example is the word advice. Many learners memorize the word, but native speakers often say give advice or ask for advice. By learning the whole phrase, you're learning vocabulary and grammar together, and that makes speaking much smoother and more natural.
Exactly, Alex. This is why I encourage learners to collect phrases from real conversations, podcasts, movies, and books instead of writing down isolated words. For example, phrases like to be honest, it depends on, I'm looking forward to it, that makes sense, and at the end of the day appear constantly in everyday English. These expressions are incredibly powerful because they help you sound more natural and give you ready-made tools for conversations. When you hear a useful phrase, write it down and practice saying it aloud several times until it feels comfortable.
And here's a practical daily routine that anyone can follow. Every day, choose 3 useful phrases that you hear or read. Write them in a notebook or on your phone, then create 1 short sentence with each phrase. For example, if today's phrase is I'm looking forward to it, you could say, I'm looking forward to meeting my friend tomorrow. If the phrase is it depends on, you could say, it depends on my schedule. This simple exercise takes only a few minutes, but it teaches your brain to use English the way real speakers use it. And the wonderful thing about this habit is that the results appear surprisingly quickly. After a few weeks, you'll notice that common phrases start coming to your mind automatically during conversations. Instead of stopping to think about grammar or searching for individual words, you'll be able to respond more smoothly and confidently. That's one of the biggest differences between learners who know English and learners who speak English fluently. So remember, don't just collect words, collect phrases, because phrases are the building blocks of natural, confident communication. And now we've reached our 5th and final daily habit, and in many ways, it's the habit that connects everything we've talked about today. That habit is practice a little every single day. One of the biggest misconceptions about learning English is that you need to study for 3 or 4 hours at a time to make real progress. The truth is, consistency is far more powerful than intensity. Your brain learns best through regular repetition, not occasional marathon study sessions. Studying for just 20 or 30 minutes every day creates a much stronger learning habit than studying for 5 hours only once a week. Every small practice session strengthens your memory, builds your confidence, and makes English feel like a natural part of your everyday life, rather than a subject you only study occasionally.
I couldn't agree more, Emma. Think about learning English the same way you think about exercising. If someone goes to the gym for 6 hours on one day and then doesn't exercise again for the next 2 weeks, they probably won't see much improvement. But someone who exercises for just 20 or 30 minutes every day will gradually become stronger, healthier, and more confident. English works exactly the same way. Small, consistent practice may not seem exciting at first, but over time, it produces incredible results. The learners who become fluent are usually not the ones who study the hardest for one day. They're the ones who never stop practicing.
That's why it's so helpful to create a simple daily English routine that fits into your lifestyle. For example, you could spend 5 minutes thinking in English after you wake up, 10 minutes listening to an English podcast while you're traveling or doing household chores, 5 minutes speaking out loud about your day, and another 10 minutes reviewing useful phrases before going to bed. That's less than half an hour in total. But because you're practicing every day, you're constantly strengthening all 4 language skills: listening, speaking, vocabulary, and confidence. The key is to make your routine realistic so that you can follow it every day instead of giving up after a few days.
And here's something I'd like every listener to remember whenever they feel discouraged. Progress in English isn't always easy to notice from one day to the next. You might practice today and feel exactly the same tomorrow. But if you continue practicing consistently for 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months, you'll be amazed at how much easier English has become. You'll understand more, speak more naturally, and feel much more confident in conversations. Real fluency isn't built overnight. It's built one day at a time through hundreds of small victories that eventually lead to a huge transformation.